In 1980, Aston Villa would climb to the top of the English division, winning the title with only 14 outfield players, securing a momentous 7th division title in the club's history. 45 years later, Aston Villa see themselves within another possible position and face the reality of a title charge. But is this actually the case? In this video, we're going to talk about Aston Villa's chances of winning the Premier League title 45 years later from their 7th division title winning victory. We're going to be looking at the facts versus a little bit of a realistic opinion on this and try and decide where we lie amongst it. But without further ado, if you are going to enjoy this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and let's get straight in. So, after a 3-month hibernation, I have finally awoken from my slumber. In that time, we have gone from a Champions League quarter-final matchup with PSG to find ourselves losing to go-ahead Eagles in the Europa League. What a magnificent span of time across 5 months. But within those time, we are obviously now in the position of Aston Villa being within the top 4 and now considered title contenders. I use those quotation marks liberally because I do have an opinion on that, but we'll get to that in a bit later. We're looking at the facts here. If you have been living under a rock, Aston Villa placed Arsenal in the weekend just prior, and we saw them win 2-1 against the current top of the table team. Now, this is quite a big game. If you did watch it, it was actually a really good game, probably one of the best games of the season for the Premier League so far. And it helped to really establish two teams that, you know, might be overcoming some struggles even over the past years. Two teams, when put together, can show a mighty good set of footballing skill, attacking threat, and defensive display. Within this game, we saw two things. Obviously, the victory from Aston Villa, taking the lead first off from a Matty Cash goal to ultimately winning the game in the 94th minute from an Emi Buendia goal. This would see Aston Villa's position in the Premier League table be taken up to 3rd place, 3 points behind Arsenal in 33. With this in mind, it was now considered that Aston Villa would be seen as title contenders, given the gap closing between the top of the league and Aston Villa showing an immense display of form across the last 12 matches. As a matter of fact, in the last 12 games, Aston Villa now place themselves at top of the form table in the league with 9 victories, 2 draws and 1 loss. That 1 loss coming across from Liverpool 2-0 away at Anfield. Now, why are Aston Villa considered in the title race? Well, like I said, the gap between the top of the league has been closing. 3 points separate us now from Arsenal, although Man City do find themselves 2 points behind Arsenal, therefore being in 2nd place. And also, you could argue that Man City will be a much stronger threat to Arsenal, but again, that's something we'll talk about later on. Aston Villa are the informed team in the league. We're one of the informed teams in football in general, displaying a tremendous amount of form. Aston Villa haven't lost a home game since August 2024. We would then lose to Crystal Palace in the league, but it has also been, just in general, a solitude of fortress at Aston Villa Park. Now, when we look at the next fixtures for Aston Villa in the Premier League, not talking about the Europa League or the FA Cup, we are only going to be looking at the Premier League fixtures. Our next game is West Ham away, Manchester United at home, Chelsea away, and then we play league leaders Arsenal away from home. So it's not exactly the easiest of games. You could argue the first 2 games could be an easy 3 points. Again, Villa's home form has been superb since the last year. So going against Manchester United team that are very inconsistent at the moment, although they're starting to pick up points with a victory over Wolves away, you could realistically see Aston Villa doing the points here. West Ham as well, not showing the same level of progression that they achieved since winning the Conference League a few years ago, consistently falling themselves down the table and into the bottom half of the league. Realistically, as an Aston Villa fan, you could sit there and say that a 6 points surely to be guaranteed for Aston Villa. It's the next games that are the most tricky ones. Chelsea away from home. Now, typically, we don't tend to do very well at Chelsea. I know in the last 3 seasons that we have managed to pick up points there, but it doesn't always end up being that way, and we do sometimes struggle when we go to Stamford Bridge. Not to mention, going to the Emirates is always a difficult challenge for anybody away in the Premier League, or even just in Europe in general. Especially with their fan base, you're playing against the top of the table, and not to mention having already played them only 24 days ago, this can also be a little bit of a challenge. But you've got to sit there and think, Aston Villa, with the form that they are on, they are currently 3rd place in the Europa League qualification. I know we're level on points, however the league does not lie when it says we are in 3rd place. We're in 3rd place. Aston Villa still have a FA Cup game to play against Tottenham Hotspur at some point. Now, having already gone out of the Carabao Cup, whilst it was immensely disappointing to see Villa throw this away, you could also argue that this has benefited Aston Villa, as it's less games to worry about and more focus on the competitions that may mean more to the club, given the strategic transfer window that has taken place, not to mention the difficulties with PSR, SER and all those finances to wages ratio not matching up. It's very interesting to see how Aston Villa have managed not only quite a limited transfer window, one that was quite underwhelming, into seeing a team that is now managing to flourish and find its form, beating the likes of the top of the table and staying in and amongst the top 4 position yet again for another season in a row. The form values Aston Villa. Now, whilst we are mid in the December, which means we're only still a third of the way through the season at the moment, there's still plenty of football to be played. There's still another transfer window to happen. There's still competitions to carry on playing out. However, you'd have to look at it and say that Aston Villa do pose a great threat. The consistency is there, the form is showing, teams are kind of in and amongst the tables. We're seeing the likes of Brighton, Crystal Palace, Newcastle push their way back into Europe, whereas the likes of Liverpool, Brentford, Tottenham and Nottingham Forest, who were top 4 contenders for most of last season, slipped down into the bottom half of the table. It's sort of those factors there that kind of make you sit there and think Aston Villa, through all the difficulties that have been faced, they are managing to find their feet within and amongst the tables. It does show a great sense of form. Looking at Arsenal's next Premier League fixtures, Fulham at home, West Ham away, Burnley at home and Crystal Palace away. Although Crystal Palace do seem to pose a few problems for them, realistically, that's 12 points there for Arsenal to accomplish. Man City's next games, Crystal Palace away, West Ham at home, Nottingham Forest away. Again, given the level of inconsistency that you may find with Manchester City, you've got to think that given the form that they can show as well, and the ability that they can come back within a season, you've got to fancy them as well as title challengers. So it's all to play for, and it's something that realistically, at this moment in time, we couldn't sit there and say who is going to be the next Premier League champions. However, with Aston Villa showing the form and showing that great level of consistency, it's very hard to rule out the facts and consider Aston Villa as title contenders. Now, with all the facts and factoids and whatever you want to believe out the way, let's get realistic and let's talk from the heart here. I've seen a lot of creators on this channel and a lot of creators on YouTube, TikTok and in the Villa fan base have a lot of opinions on this. We go from the likes of Justin Talks Villa, who believes it is almost a guaranteed certainty that Aston Villa will be winning the league, even much so from the start of the season. I've seen creators saying that this was bound to happen, the form's there, we are dead set on winning the title. Now let me put this into the most realistic and also just grounded level approach that we can. We are not winning the league this season. Now, again, we've already discussed facts and I appreciate that the factoids are there. I appreciate that it clearly shows that we are, on form. But this is football we're talking about. We're talking about a team here that are realistically not prepared for winning a Premier League. We have not got the calibre of the squad, firstly, to win a Premier League. You can't go into a whole season with a striker that's been injured, and it's known throughout the team that it's been injured, sell him, and then expect him to be finding us goals. We cannot go into a Premier League season expecting to win the league when our transfer window does not match the level of ambition that the fans want to achieve. You're not going to achieve it with the signing of Evan Gesson. Right, no matter how much you back that player, he's simply showing that he's not cut out for this level of quality that we need at Aston Villa. Let's bear in mind the start of the season as well, because everybody seems to almost forget about this. We didn't win a game until September. Now, to be roughly precise, that was the 28th of September. The league started on the 16th of August. That's nearly over 24, let's think the numbers here. It's almost a month, right? It's almost a month since Aston Villa won their first game of football. Bear in mind, we didn't even score a goal for a very long time until Brentford away in the Carabao Cup, which we ultimately lost the game. By who was it, well, you may ask? Harvey Elliott, a player that's, that could be a whole video on its own. But bear in mind, Villa did not win a football game in the Premier League for over a month. And it's not the fact that you can't come back from this and win the Premier League. For me personally, you need consistency when you're winning the Premier League. You cannot go the first 5 or 6 games without scoring a goal. You can't go 6 or 7 games without winning a game. It doesn't happen. You don't do that and then go and win the league. I know everybody can look at the likes of Leicester, and that's probably where everyone's ambitions come from, in the sense of you can go from relegation contenders to, you know, skipping out on relegation on the last day, last season, to then going on to win the league in this miraculous 500 to 1 chance. The problem is, though, we are not Leicester City. We are not showing that level of ambition, and it's a lot of factors that can come into this. You know, we could talk about a transfer window and not ultimately signing another striker when it was clearly evident that we needed one. Evan Gesson clearly being this big money sign that has not proven to be a success. The Harvey Elliott fiasco, Jadon Sancho, you know, missing out on the likes of Marco Asensio and Marcus Rashford. Rashford I can understand, one in Champions League and playing for Barcelona, that's a very appealing factor for him. Marco Asensio, if the wages were the problem there, and also again the lack of Champions League football, the club only had themselves to blame, because that could have been achieved last season had 1 or 2 fixtures gone the right way. Not to mention, performance-wise, I don't think, apart from Bournemouth this season, we have seen one comprehensive game that has shown a near flawless or perfect performance that makes you believe in title-winning contenders. Nothing this season has been easy for Aston Villa Football Club, and it's been shown evidently through the injuries, the squad rotation that we have seen, the amount of defensive changes that we've seen. Not to mention, again, the start of the season that was experienced. We didn't score a goal for 5 to 6 games. That is not enough to warrant sitting there and being optimistic or falsely positive about we're going to win the Premier League. You can have your optimism and positivity, that's perfectly fine, but be level in your approach and don't be falsely blinded just because, oh, it makes me look like a bad Villa fan if I'm not ultimately pessimistic. We're all pessimistic. It's the hope that's going to kill us, isn't it? We all want to win the Premier League. I'd love to win the Premier League. You know what I mean? No doubt about it. I want to win every game. But it's not going to happen because you have to be realistic. If you can't do it at the start of the season, and again, you know, form table-wise, that's perfectly fine. But ultimately, this result against Arsenal means absolutely nothing if Villa were to go to West Ham in our next Premier League game and lose the game. It means nothing regarding Europa League if we go to Basel and lose it. Because bear in mind, this has happened already this season. Everybody looked at Go Ahead Eagles and said, we're going to beat them, we're going to roll over them. The level of quality that they have does not match Aston Villa's, and we absolutely got steamrolled by them. Don't sit there and say it isn't possible to lose these games. It is possible, and ultimately you can't be doing that. We have to be going into these games with the absolute certainty that we are going to beat these teams. And it's the same with the Arsenal game. The optimism was there. If we're not going to have that optimism, we're not going to win the league. We also need a squad that is ready for the league. We need a striker. We need some better defensive signings. You know, there's injuries all over the team that are consistently coming up here. Some players that you could expect because ultimately, you know, their track record's not really showing it, or the age is finally catching up to him. That's why you need to invest in your squad and use a better sense of squad management. Something that I've been very critical of in Emery this season, because it feels like we're only rotating amongst 16 players. But it's all about just being realistic at the end of the day. I'm not seeing a team here that I would sit there and say are going to win the Premier League. I'd love to see it. It would be nothing short of amazing. But it's a false argument, because how are we going to be saying, well, we're going to win the league this season when 2 seasons ago we were in the exact same position and yet ended up qualifying 4th in the Champions League? Why weren't we title contenders then? Why weren't we title contenders last season or the season prior to achieving Champions League? It doesn't really make sense. Why is it now with a squad that's worse than it was a year or 2 ago and hasn't exactly shown the best of start to a season or performances? Why is it now that we're going to be winning the league? What is it now, given what we've seen this season, that is convincing you we're going to win the league? And that's my question. What is it really that we are seeing that's going to convince people that Aston Villa can go and win the Premier League this season? So with all this in mind, I'm going to wrap up the video there, because otherwise I'm going to spend another 20 minutes just reiterating the same points over and over again. Do you realistically believe Aston Villa are going to win the league this season? Or you are like me and sit there and say, the ambition is there, the quality is there to get top 4, but we're not ready for the Premier League and it needs to be matched with the same level of ambition and realism? Let me know in the comments down below. But I hope you did enjoy the video. Please leave a like, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Up the Villa with the pride of Villa. We'll see you later, boys.